French prosecutors confirmed the death of the alleged mastermind of the Paris terror attacks. Somalia opens its embassy in Washington, D.C. after nearly 24 years. And football and fashion icon David Beckham has been named the sexiest man alive by People magazine. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Tonight, French prosecutors have confirmed that the alleged mastermind of last Friday's Paris massacre is dead. Paris prosecutors say the bullet-riddled body of Abdelhamid Abaoud, a Belgian national of Moroccan descent, was found inside an apartment following a 7-hour police raid in a northern suburb of Paris. Abaoud, who was 27 or 28 years old, was identified from fingerprints. Here's VOA's Daniel Cherv with more on the raid.
French security descended on the northern Paris suburb of Saint-Denis after an early morning raid on suspected militants led to a tense standoff. Despite warnings from police for people to stay indoors, a number of residents came out to watch the 7-hour ordeal. Some were unable to get to their homes inside the cordoned-off neighborhood.
We are not safe right now. Stressed, anguished, and afraid.
Even after the standoff ended, police continued their security sweep. At one point, riot police broke down the door of a nearby church. Saint-Denis is ethnically diverse, with many migrants. Some here are sensitive to how they are looked at by the media and complain of tensions with authorities. Others welcome the massive police presence.
In 2005, yes, with the riots, etc. Yes, it's true, but nothing as big as this.
An unprecedented security operation wrapping up here in Saint-Denis just days after the Paris attacks, reminding everyone that the threat of terrorism to France, while this investigation continues, remains very real. Daniel Sheriff, VOA News, Saint-Denis.
While the world's attention is centered on Paris, terror attacks remain a looming threat in many African countries. Nigerian cities are being targeted this week by attacks many believe were staged by the violent Islamist group Boko Haram. In addition, residents in many regions are forced to flee their homes as they are terrorized by armed militias. VOA's Zlatisa Hoke tells us more.
Combating violence in Africa was the focus of Wednesday's meeting between U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and his Angolan counterpart George Chikoti.
I am confident today we will focus significantly on the challenge of Burundi, the violence that is breaking out there in the region. And Angola plays a very special role. It has a senior leadership stature that has been very important to helping to find peaceful resolution to some of these conflicts.
Since April, tensions have been brewing in Burundi, where President Pierre Nkurunziza ran for a third term, contrary to the country's constitution. The ruling party militias are striking terror among civilians linked to the opposition, with many fleeing to neighboring Tanzania and Uganda. If they are able to return, they may not find their homes as they left them.
They have destroyed houses and looted a lot of things. When these people come back, they will see that most of their things are stolen.
In South Sudan, rival ethnic militias terrorized the civilian population, forcing many to flee across the border and live on charity. Meanwhile, some of the oil facilities that could make the country rich have been abandoned, and their waste poses a threat to the environment.
We saw massive leakages of oil, which was coming out from tubes, from oil containers. We also saw chemicals that were allowed to seep into the soil.
Angola's foreign minister said terrorism is as big a threat in Africa as it is in Europe.
Particularly when we see what is happening in Nigeria, but also very recently in France. So I think all those issues will certainly continue to be our concern.
Explosions in the Nigerian cities Kano and Yola this week that have killed dozens of people and wounded many others signal that Boko Haram has not yet succumbed to the government's efforts to defeat the continent's deadliest group. Zlatisa Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, a deprived neighborhood in Brussels is at the heart of the investigation into the Paris attacks, which killed 129 people. Belgium has seen more of its nationals leave to fight for the Islamic State terror group than any other country relative to its population. Henry Ridgwell looks at Belgium's growing problem of extremism.
Abdelhamid Abaoud, believed to be the mastermind of the Paris attacks, grew up in the Molenbeek district of Brussels. Fellow militant Brahim Abdeslam, who blew himself up outside a Paris cafe, owned this bar in Molenbeek. His brother Salah, another of the attackers, is being hunted by police. Intelligence analysts say the neighborhood has become a breeding ground for extremists.
Molenbeek est une commune qui a été longtemps laissée, je dirais presque à l'abandon. Et dans cette population,
Molenbeek is a commune that has been abandoned. There is a radical fringe, not very large, but real, and it has existed for 20 or 30 years. So we saw people settle in Molenbeek who have become sort of leaders of radical Islam, not only in Belgium, but also in Europe.
Police have carried out several raids across Molenbeek. Residents say they feel under siege from all sides.
Now we have to watch the young people. I don't know what's going on in their heads. I just don't know.
In 2001, the assassins of Afghanistan's anti-Taliban commander Ahmad Shah Massoud had stayed in Molenbeek. One of the main plotters of the 2004 Madrid train bombings lived in the district. In 2014, 4 people were killed in a gun attack on the Jewish Museum in Brussels. The main suspect had stayed in Molenbeek. And Ayoub El-Kazani, who attempted to carry out a gun attack on a Paris-bound train in August that was foiled by off-duty US servicemen, had stayed in the same neighbourhood.
Belgium has a huge problem of its nationals getting radicalized. Many have joined as volunteers for ISIS and even Jabhat al-Nusra.
Analyst Sajan Gohel says terrorists are exploiting Europe's open borders.
We are seeing a nexus develop between Belgium and France for terrorist-related activity and exploited by ISIS.
Belgium's foreign minister was asked this week if the country is a weak link in the fight against terror.
I don't want to answer that. We are a strong link. We are trying to fight very effectively.
Authorities say they have foiled several terrorist attacks, but pressure is growing on Belgium to crack down harder on Islamist extremism in the political heart of Europe. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
US President Barack Obama on Thursday said efforts to defeat the Islamic State terror group will not succeed until there is a political agreement in Syria.
It is not going to be sufficient for us to have formal political processes that lead to Assad still being in power. And the reason is not simply because of my opinion of him. It's because it is unimaginable that you can stop the civil war there when the overwhelming majority of people in Syria consider him to be a brutal, murderous dictator.
Mr. Obama spoke after meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on the sidelines of an Asian-Pacific conference in the Philippines. The U.S. and other Western countries that have supported rebel fighters have long insisted Assad must go, while Syrian allies Russia and Iran have opposed those calls. The U.S. House of Representatives is planning to vote Thursday on a bill sponsored by the Republican majority that would pause the Obama administration's program to resettle Iraqi and Syrian refugees to the United States. President Obama is threatening to veto the measure, which would slow the entry of Syrian migrants into the United States. The White House said in a statement that the bill would add unnecessary and impractical requirements to the screening process for refugees.
Someone needs to explain clearly to the American people the processes that we go through before we admit refugees.
U.S. House Speaker Paul Ryan is calling for a pause in the U.S. acceptance of Syrian refugees, saying terrorists should not be allowed to take advantage of the country's compassion. President Obama said Wednesday stopping the resettlement process would amount to acting out of fear.
We don't make good decisions if it's based on hysteria or an exaggeration of risks.
Several House Democrats have come out strongly against any measures to block Syrian and Iraqi refugees, saying they already are rigorously vetted under the present system. President Barack Obama has promised to take in 10,000 Syrian refugees during the coming fiscal year. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vincent Makori. Now, coming up, a look at the state of cancer in Africa. Stay with us.
Science and technology, here's what's new.
What's new? How about balloon-delivered internet for everyone? At least that's what Google plans for with what they call Project Loon. Project Loon will eventually involve thousands of balloons traveling approximately 20 kilometers above the Earth in the stratosphere. Mike Cassidy leads the project.
To steer one balloon left or right, you actually go up or down. And that's because in the stratosphere, the wind goes slightly different direction at a different altitude. To provide continuous internet service, you're talking a complex choreography where thousands of balloons are being steered and programmed all in an automated fashion.
So soon, hopefully, there'll be thousands of balloons surfing the stratosphere, offering the internet to the more than 4 billion people on the planet without access. For VOA's What's New, I'm Todd Grossans.
Welcome back. Now, in the wake of the Paris attacks, U.S. warplanes are striking at the heart of the Islamic State group's finances. New video released by the Pentagon Wednesday shows the destruction of more than 100 oil tankers in Syria being used to smuggle the oil that finances the terrorist group. VOA's Calabab has more on the air assault.
The U.S.-led coalition says it took out 116 of these tanker trucks in an operation this week over Syria's Abu Kamal.
This was a sudden strike. This was a tidal wave that swept across these oil fields and has really crippled them.
The Abu Kamal oil field sits inside Syria's Deir ez-Zor district. According to the coalition, this one district accounts for nearly 2/3 of all Islamic State oil revenue, adding about $750,000 per day to Islamic State coffers.
The oil funds more than 50% of ISIL's operations, and this is something we want to take away from them.
Earlier, U.S. strikes had avoided these trucks for fear the drivers might be regular Syrian civilians. So about an hour before the strikes began, the coalition dropped these leaflets warning airstrikes are coming and get away from your oil trucks immediately.
Many of them have got the message that smuggling oil for ISIL is a much more dangerous business now than it was last week.
The coalition says it will continue to hit targets from tanker truck to wellhead, breaking the entire chain of Islamic State oil revenue. Carla Babb, VOA News, The Pentagon.
Well, Somalia has opened its embassy in Washington, D.C. after nearly 24 years. Officials from the U.S. Department of State, U.S. Congress, and the Somali Foreign Minister, Abdusalim Hadiye Omar, attended the ceremony. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs Linda Thomas-Greenfield, who represented the U.S. government, said the opening of the embassy is historic for both the U.S. and Somalia. She said the East African nation is recovering from its conflict in the past and reclaiming a brighter future for its people. Speaking to VOA, Somali Foreign Minister Abdusalim Hadiye Omar said the U.S.-Somalia relationship is blossoming.
We are looking forward to a robust relationship with the United States. We have Somali Americans, including yours truly, who their commitment to this country and to their commitment to Somalia is parallel, and the United States needs the long coast of Somalia for strategic purposes. It's available to them. They are helping us rebuild our national army. They have supported us in many different ways, and they are involved in rebuilding the financial parts for the country.
Well, for nearly 20 years, Somalia had no central government and was considered a failed state, rather. Now, the U.S. and Somalia renewed bilateral relations 2 years ago. Welcome back. In our health segment today, Roadmap to Cancer Control in Africa is the theme of the International Conference on Cancer taking place in Marrakesh, Morocco. Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu is attending the conference and now joins us live via phone from Marrakesh. Lino, what's happening today in Marrakesh?
Hello, Vincent. So today the conference, actually the official start of the conference is tomorrow, but today there were a series of workshops and panel discussions, and several topics were on the table, including pediatric cancer and how to address some of the challenges in terms of access to treatment.
Now, we know you've been speaking to people there. Can you give us a little bit more details on who you spoke to today?
Yes, so I spoke to a few people, including first Professor Ahmed El-Zawawi, who is the president of AORTIC. AORTIC is the African Organization for Research and Training in Cancer, which is the organizing group for this conference. And basically, he talked about the fact that the idea of bringing these people together under this conference is to see ways to create better synergy among African countries along with others, non-Africans, to direct efforts for better training and research to help African cancer patients. He also talked about the focus on how to increase affordability of cancer drugs, treatment, management, and palliative care.
Now, we know cancer is becoming a big problem across the continent of Africa. What are some of the specific topics that will be discussed in the coming days, beginning tomorrow?
So there will be many different topics, including basic sciences of cancer, how does cancer develop, genetics, looking at genetics, how it's being transmitted from parents to their children. Also, telemedicine, how telemedicine is playing a role in remote cancer treatment or remote cancer care. Also looking at chemotherapy, epidemiology, and innovative ways of treating cancers. What is being done by African researchers to also lead the way in finding a better treatment for cancer patients on the continent.
Now, who else is attending this conference besides journalists like yourself and doctors?
Yes, as you said, journalists, doctors, researchers are attending, survivors. I spoke to a male survivor. Believe it or not, there are men that are affected by breast cancer, and I spoke to a male survivor of breast cancer. There are also experts are coming from Africa, but also Europe and America. You have the National Institute of Health from the U.S. That is here, WHO, of course. Several people from WHO are here. So it's really a wide range of backgrounds in terms of knowledge, expertise, and interest. Even companies are here to sell their equipment, cutting-edge equipment in cancer treatment, detection, and control. So it's a really dynamic and diverse group that is here. About 1,000 people are attending this conference in Marrakesh.
Up to this point, what have you heard about the fact that one of the biggest problems in Africa is the lack of doctors, oncologists, people who can help identify and help cure this disease?
It's a serious problem indeed, Vincent, and it's one of the issues that Professor El-Zawawi was mentioning, the fact that they really want to focus on training. Look at this, for example, when it comes to pediatric cancer, some countries don't even have expert pediatric oncologists to take care of children that are affected with cancer. And you have countries that do not have this type of expertise. So yes, it is a serious problem. Training is a serious problem, and this is one of the issues that they hope to address moving forward in terms of improving training with partnerships from the West and other countries.
Lenore, thanks a lot for your excellent reporting there. Africa 54 Health correspondent Lino Madou reporting live from Marrakesh in Morocco. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Piracy impedes the rapidly growing Nollywood film industry. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Nigeria, 2 young suicide bombers killed at least 15 people in a mobile market in Kano following the bomb blast in Yola. We stay in Nigeria, where thousands protest to release an activist in support of a separate state of Biafra. In South Sudan, President Salva Kiir asked lawmakers to support a bill to create NGOs Bank in the country to reverse the decline in the economy. In Egypt, an anti-sexual harassment campaign in the capital Cairo uses comics to create awareness. Finally, in Kenya, preparations are being made for the arrival of the Pope next week. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
I'm Esther Gidui-Ewart. Here's what's trending. Football and fashion icon David Beckham has been named as the year's sexiest man alive by People magazine. David Beckham most recently played with the American soccer team, the Los Angeles Galaxy. Earlier, Beckham played for 10 years with Manchester United in England's Premier League before moving to other clubs abroad. He also spent time as captain of England's international squad. He received an Order of the British Empire in 2003. And actor Denzel Washington will be the 2016 recipient of the Cecil B. DeMille Award at the Golden Globes. The award is given once a year to stars who have made outstanding contributions to the world of entertainment. Past recipients have included George Clooney, Jodie Foster, Morgan Freeman, and Robert De Niro. As an actor and filmmaker, Washington has racked up 7 Golden Globe nominations in the past, with 2 wins. He has also received 2 Oscars, 2 Emmys, and even a Grammy. The award ceremony will air in January. And that's what's trending today, Vincent.
Well, thanks a lot. Now, Nigeria's Nollywood film industry is rapidly growing in popularity, churning out nearly 3,000 movies each year. Many of the films address issues that Africans across the continent can identify with. However, due to piracy, many filmmakers say they are struggling to make a profit. Africa 54's Paul Dio has more.
Nollywood is a $5 billion industry. Film producer Sam Boye is on the set taking his actors through their paces before shooting begins on his latest production, a soap opera about family feuds. Boye has been involved in Nollywood films for nearly 30 years. He says rampant piracy is the main reason film producers are barely making any money.
A producer was in China. He was in China and he said he saw our movie on, they call it 20 in 1, that you have 20 movies in one DVD. In China, that is, it's been dubbed into Chinese language without the consent of the producer.
Nollywood is best known for the quantity of film it produces, but not quality. But there are those who are trying to change things. Producer-director Kunle Afoloyan is the filmmaker behind October 1st. Nollywood's film set in 1960, against the backdrop of Nigeria's independence from Britain. The movie tells the story of a detective who is dispatched by the British colonial masters to a remote town in the western region of Nigeria to solve a series of murders that caused outrage in the community. With 3 films under his belt, Afoloyan has earned a reputation in Nollywood for producing quality movies.
It's a nightmare. It's a universal problem, but they kind of
the way it's being done here, it's alarming. When your film gets pirated and people flashes it in your face and nobody is doing anything, and when you even complain, they want to beat you up like there's no law in the land. All my film has been pirated, but the most painful one is October 1, which has not even been released on DVD.
Every week in Lagos alone, millions of pirated Nollywood and Bollywood movies compete for customers against the original product. The pirated copies are sold everywhere on sidewalks, street corners, under bridges, and even on top of wheelbarrows for about $1. Nigeria's Copyright Commission says the government is doing all it can to combat piracy. Afam Ezikudu is the Director General of the Copyright Commission.
With the proactive enforcement and prosecution activities of the Commission over the last 4.5 years, we have actually reduced the rate of piracy. We are not boasting of trying to eliminate or eradicate piracy in this society, but we have done a lot in terms of trying to limit the impact of piracy.
Still, industry analysts like economist David Omidrian believe Nollywood could be much more profitable and grow even further to boost the oil-producing economy.
The industry is growing about 13% per annum, so we could expect the industry to grow by instantaneously maybe 40% and then consistently for at least the next 4 or 5 years.
Since its inception nearly 20 years ago, the Nigerian movie industry has remained one of the largest employers in the country. And analysts say the industry earns the third highest revenues in the world after Hollywood and Bollywood. Paul Ndiho, VOA News.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us here in Washington. Have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords.
Here is a story that has to do with defects or problems with cars.
Listen for the word that means to take back something. Recall.
They had meetings over this defect. They shared complaints over this defect. Yet there was no investigation by the government and no recall by General Motors until 10 years later.
Recall. It is a word that means to ask people officially to return something.
In our story, there were major problems with some General Motors cars. The man says the U.S. government and the car company took too long to issue a recall, so the cars could be fixed.
Now, when you hear the word recall, your American English will be good enough to know what this news word means.